Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the phenomenal, the one and only.
She wasn't just born into Hollywood, she was born into one of its royal bloodlines. A Barrymore, a name that shaped American cinema long before she could walk. But what happens when a child of destiny becomes a child of headlines? Before she turned 7, Drew Barrymore had already captured the hearts of the world in E.T. before she turned 10. She had already tasted the darkness that destroys grown adults. And before she turned 14, she had lived through a rise, a fall, and a rehab that would have broken anyone else. This is the story of a girl who grew up too fast, who shined too bright, and who paid too high a price for a fame she never asked for. How does someone who lost her childhood to Hollywood become one of the most beloved, resilient, and influential women in the industry? This is the journey of Drew Barrymore, a miracle, a tragedy, and a rebirth the world never saw coming. Drew Barrymore was born into the spotlight, not gently placed, but thrust directly into its glare. Born in Culver City, California, she carried a last name that Hollywood treated like a crown, Barrymore, the dynasty that had defined American theater and film for generations. Her grandfather, John Barrymore, was called the Great Profile, a legend of the stage and silver screen. Her parents, John Drew Barrymore and Jade Barrymore, were actors too, but fame had not been kind to them. In the Barrymore household, glamour and chaos lived under the same roof. Drew's father was a brilliant yet troubled man, in and out of her life battling addiction and instability. Her mother, Jade, drifted between the roles of parent, friend, and manager, often blurring every boundary a child desperately needs. Hollywood parties, adult conversations, and late-night chaos became Drew's normal before she even understood what normal was supposed to mean. At just 11 months old, she appeared in her first commercial. At 2, she was auditioning. At 4, she was already working more than most adults. And when E.T. arrived, the world saw an adorable wide-eyed girl with a laugh impossible to forget. What they didn't see was the loneliness behind that smile. What they didn't hear were the voices of adults who should have protected her, but instead pulled her deeper into a world she wasn't ready for. This wasn't simply childhood. This was survival in a home where fame was oxygen and innocence was the price. From the moment Drew stepped in front of a camera, directors saw something rare, not just talent, but a spark that felt impossibly natural for a child. By the time she was 4, she was landing roles that seasoned actors fought for. Her auditions were described as fearless, instinctive, and uncannily alive. But the moment that changed everything came when Steven Spielberg cast her as Gertie in E.T. the Extraterrestrial. It wasn't just a role. It was a cultural earthquake. In 1982, E.T. became a worldwide phenomenon, and Drew, the smallest actor on set, became its emotional heartbeat. Her giggles, her teary-eyed goodbyes, her effortless charm. Audiences across the world felt as if they were watching a real child, not a performance. The film shot her into global superstardom almost overnight. Magazine covers, TV interviews, Hollywood events. She wasn't just famous, she became the symbol of childhood innocence in American cinema. But behind the applause was a troubling truth. Drew's breakthrough had placed her on a pedestal far too high for a child to balance on. She was now Hollywood's favorite daughter, adored and scrutinized in equal measure, and as the spotlight intensified, the world celebrated her success, while no one questioned whether her childhood was quietly slipping away. After surviving the turbulence of her early teens, Drew Barrymore did something Hollywood never expected. She came back, stronger, fearless, and fully in control of her own narrative. By the mid-1990s, she reinvented herself from former child star in trouble into a bold young actress unafraid to take risks. Her comeback roles were a declaration. Drew Barrymore was here to stay. In Poison Ivy, she shattered her child star image with a raw, provocative performance that proved she was capable of much more than innocence. Then came Scream, where she appeared only in the film's opening, but delivered a scene so iconic it changed the landscape of horror cinema. Hollywood took notice. So did the world. But her true ascent came with the films that defined late 90s and early 2000s romantic comedies. The Wedding Singer, Never Been Kissed, and later 50 First Dates showcased her warmth. humor, and unique ability to make audiences root for her with every breath. These were not just roles. They were extensions of her soul, gentle, optimistic, deeply human. Then came Charlie's Angels. A global blockbuster. A cultural reset. A statement that Drew Barrymore was no longer just an actress. She was a force. Behind the camera, she launched Flower Films, a production company that became one of the most influential female-led studios in Hollywood. Under her leadership, Flower Films produced hit after hit, elevating her from performer to producer, from survivor to powerhouse. By her early 30s, Drew had achieved what seemed impossible. She rebuilt her career, reclaimed her image, and became one of the most beloved and highest-paid actresses of her generation. But with every rise in Hollywood, a shadow always waits. And Drew's next battle would not take place on a film set, but within herself and in the relentless court of public opinion. For most actors, scandal comes after fame. For Drew Barrymore, scandal arrived before she even became a teenager. The world adored the adorable girl from E.T., but behind the magazine covers and red carpets, Drew was spiraling through an adulthood she was far too young to understand. While other kids were learning multiplication tables, Drew was learning how to navigate Hollywood's darkest corners. At 9 years old, she was already drinking at parties. At 10, she was smoking marijuana. By 12, cocaine had entered her world, handed to her in rooms filled with adults who treated her not as a child, but as entertainment. Hollywood didn't step in. The media didn't intervene. They watched and sold newspapers doing it. By 13, her mother checked her into rehab, a place filled with women twice her age, battling demons she hadn't even had time to name. Drew relapsed, struggled, then returned to rehab again, this time in a facility more like an institution, where she spent over a year trying to rebuild the pieces of a life she never really had the chance to form. Her relationship with her mother deteriorated to the point that Drew sought legal emancipation at just 15. A teenager, alone, cutting legal ties with the only parent she had. Tabloids celebrated her downfall loudly. They framed her as a cautionary tale. Hollywood whispered that her career was over before it even began. And for a moment, it looked true. Auditions disappeared. Studios didn't trust her. She wasn't the charming starlet from E.T. anymore. She was a scandal, a risk, a headline. This was Drew Barrymore's lowest point, a place where most child stars vanish forever. But Drew was about to do something Hollywood had never seen from someone so young. She was going to rise, not by charm, not by luck, but by rebuilding herself from the ground up. Drew Barrymore's rebirth didn't happen in a single moment. It wasn't a grand comeback or a dramatic headline. It was a quiet decision, a choice to save herself when no one else would. After becoming legally emancipated at 15, Drew stepped into the world with nothing but her name and an iron will to rewrite her story. She worked small jobs, took auditions others overlooked, and carved out a space where she could rebuild not as a fallen child star, but as a young woman with something to prove. Her memoir, Little Girl Lost, became a revelation not just for readers but for Drew herself. For the first time, she confronted her past on her own terms, transforming trauma into clarity and pain into purpose. Slowly, Hollywood opened its doors again. She returned with a new image, soft but strong, vulnerable yet unbreakable. Through films like The Wedding Singer, Never Been Kissed, and 50 First Dates, she became the face of optimism, the actress whose smile carried both innocence and survival. Then came her greatest reinvention, producer. With Flower Films, Drew championed stories of resilience, love, and second chances, the very themes that had shaped her life. She built careers, launched franchises, and proved she was more than Hollywood's comeback kid. She was a creator, and years later when she stepped into hosting The Drew Barrymore Show, she embraced her final evolution, a woman who listens, comforts, uplifts, because she once needed those things herself. Drew didn't just return. She transformed. Today, Drew Barrymore stands as one of Hollywood's most remarkable survivors, not because she avoided the darkness, but because she walked through it and built a brighter world on the other side. Her legacy is more than the roles she played or the films she produced. It is the proof that a person can be broken early, shattered publicly, and still rise into someone whole. kind, and deeply human. She became a symbol of second chances, a reminder that healing is not linear, and reinvention is always possible. Her films shaped an era. Her production company empowered new voices. Her talk show reflects the warmth she fought so hard to earn, and through it all, she remains Drew, authentic, generous, and unafraid to show her scars. The journey of Drew Barrymore is proof that even when Hollywood writes your story for you, you can still take the pen back. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful Hollywood journeys.